Great morning, world. Great morning, friends. Let's get streaming. Here we go. And I believe we are live in all sorts of different places. So, great morning, world. Great morning, friends. This is your boy, Dr. JC Doornick, and welcome to another edition of the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. Today, we're going to be doing a book summary, but we're really going to be making sense of change. I don't know if you've ever experienced change before in your life, but today we're going to make sense of it. And what that means is that we're going to look at something that we typically look at in a certain way. And we're going to, first of all, take a look under the hood at the way that we look at it and consider changing the way we look at change. Isn't that interesting? And see if the way we look at change changes. So I want to welcome everybody that is watching on the live. This is our Monday live edition that ends up getting recorded as a podcast. So we're going to kick off and start that process. So great morning, world. Great morning, friends. This is Dr. JC Doornick, and welcome to another edition of the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. And today we're going to be making sense of change. And like I just said before, what's really cool about making sense of change and attaching it to this book summary that we're going to attach and connect, just imagine what it's like to make sense of change. And if you don't like the way you look at change and you want to change the way you look at change and see the way you look at change, well, then this episode is for you. We're going to be making a connection today with the unbelievably popular life-saving book called Who Moved My Cheese? And this is just, like I said, a life changer and definitely in one of my top 5. I don't know if I have any room in my top 5 all-time most impactful books, but I'm going to squeeze this one in, even if it has to be like a 5.5, just because of how amazingly impactful it's been in my life. So today's Making Sense of Change, a book summary of Who Moved My Cheese. If you're someone who's been feeling like life is moving a little bit too fast or faster than you're ready for it to move, maybe you're facing a change that feels overwhelming, uncertain, or even unwanted, that change. Today's episode is for you. And I'm just thinking right now, that's probably everybody, or at least the ones that are willing to admit it. So today we're going to be making sense of one of the most universal and challenging experiences in the human experience and journey, and that would be change. Thinking about a song right now. So to help guide the conversation, I'm going to be unpacking some delicious takeaways from one of the most well-loved and deceptively simple books on this topic, and that is Who Moved My Cheese by Dr. Spencer Johnson. So stick around, because I'm also going to show you how I typically do this, how this powerful little story and parable aligns perfectly with our 4-step interface response system. Remember, the interface response system is a system that will help you change the way you look at things so that the things that you look at change. So we're going to take this book, Who Moved My Cheese, and make a connection and integrate it into the interface response system to help you actually execute on the lessons that you're going to learn from this book. Now, what I want to say about this book is it's one of the easiest books you'll ever read. You know, I'm a speed reader and I read a lot of books, but this is like a half-day read. So the interface response system is something that we're going to connect it to, and I'm going to show you how it can help you do more than just survive and navigate change. I think a lot of people are trying to just navigate and survive change, but it's going to do more. It's going to also help you move through with more awareness, agency, and peace. If that sounds good to you, stick around and let's dive in. So I just want to take this moment and welcome everybody to the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. This podcast covers topics that expand human consciousness and performance. On the Make Sense podcast, we acknowledge that it's who you are that determines how well what you do works, and that perception, just like Guinness, is subjective and an acquired taste. Did you get that analogy? So when you change the way that you look at things, the things that you look at begin to change. The Make Sense podcast is sponsored and primarily funded by the Make Sense Academy. And that's our private community where open and curious seekers of growth and expansion apply the Make Sense principles and systems to move from simply going through life to growing through life. Welcome to the uprising of the sleepwalking masses. Check out the Make Sense Academy, risk-free for less than you will probably spend in the next day or so on some shit that you don't even need. Welcome, my friends, to the uprising of the sleepwalking masses. Welcome to the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. So I just want to take a second and say hi to some of the folks that are chiming in live. We're streaming on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. And why would I be doing that? Well, I think a lot of people like the idea of the live because who knows what can happen. You guys can ask me questions and I will answer them on this topic. You can send me nice, encouraging messages or say very, very mean things to me. I'm a person that is interested and curious about everything, and I'm here to grow with you. So great morning to everybody that's tuning in live. Great morning, Lori. I see you here, and some others. I can't see you unless you comment, but I can see that people are joining us. So let's dive into this. So first of all, this amazing book very often gets read without knowing too much about the author. So I always like to take these books that we're going to use and comment a little bit about the author. So Who Moved My Cheese was written by Dr. Spencer Johnson, who's a physician and thought leader who has a special gift, like all of us. His gift is for turning complex human behavior into simple story-based steps. That's a superpower. You know, in this world where we're trying to explain things and make sense of things, everybody's trying to make sense of things, which is the premise of a lot of the coaching that I do. So if you have this talent of taking something and turning it into a story so that somebody has an easier try at making sense of that, that's going to be greatly appreciated. So that's why his books are so wonderful, is he uses stories and fables to explain deep concepts that you might not pick up otherwise. So he co-wrote another very popular book called The 1 Minute Manager, and the book that we're going to cover today, Who Moved My Cheese, which, by the way, became an instant classic and in personal development and the corporate leadership spaces. It's been published in over 40 languages with over 28 million copies sold. That's a pretty good, successful book story, right? And you're going to see why. So why is this such a massive success, you know, for such a short book? It's just like a little half-day read. It's because it hits a deep shared nerve that sits inside all of us. And we're going to cover that today. So this book is about change, but not just the changes, but not just changes as a concept in general, change as a personal experience with confrontation. This is what makes this book really interesting. It's one thing to learn about change from afar, but he's going to talk about our interface with change, our confrontation, you know, and experience that we have with change, because that's the only aspect that we control. We don't control change. So if you're just watching change from afar, you're watching a show that you didn't produce and you didn't direct. But if you're looking at your experience and confrontation with change, there's a lot that can be done. So yes, this book is about evaluating and interfacing with change and helps us change the way that we look at things, like change the way we look at change, which makes the way that we look at change. So that is such a funny thing to say. I want to say it one more time and also get a good clip for the podcast that gets shortened and cleaned up. This book is about evaluating and interfacing with change and helps us change the way we look at change, which makes the way that we look at change. change. Say that 5 times fast. Love that. So it's about how we respond when life stops going the way that we expected, or when something we were counting on gets taken away from us. Those are the kinds of change that we need to learn how to interface with more successfully. And even though it reads like a children's story, which you're going to see soon, the message is for grown-ups navigating the real world loss and identity shifts. So there's his superpower, is he makes this like a children's book. And by the way, children will read this book and be able to get it as well. That's such a powerful move. I see that as a flaw in personal growth. And I just want to make a little bit of a disclaimer about my thoughts on personal growth and self-development. I feel like personal growth and self-development have amazing things and distinctions and insights and breakthroughs. But like Alcoholics Anonymous, you have to have a problem before you get access to them. I would love, like this amazing author has done, I would love if those greats on up to the greatest would take their books and write them in a way that a 6-year-old could understand, so they could proactively teach them things that would help them avoid the problems that people have when they end up seeking personal growth and self-development. Okay, I said it. So this book is about change, but it's done in a way that children can understand, but it's made for adults. So, and even though it reads like that children's story, you're going to see, you're going to love it. So in short, it's a parable that takes place in a maze. So if you can envision, this is a parable, a story, but it takes place in a maze. So obviously in the book, the maze is representing our lives, the maze of our lives. And in that maze exists 4 characters. So this is the fun part when you look at the characters, because they all represent different ways that we look at things and respond. So character 1, his name is Sniff. Sniff is somebody that sniffs out and senses change early, right? They see it on the horizon. And then the other character is Scurry. Scurry is someone who races into action. So the idea, as I go through these characters and we go a little bit deeper into it, is you want to try to identify which character you are at this time, because I identify that I have the ability to be all of these characters, but one of them is predominant. So try to figure that out. So Sniff senses change early. Scurry races into action. Hem denies and resists change. Oof, that's a tough one. I've been there. And then Haw, Hem and Haw, learns to adapt over time. And I think that probably represents most people that are involved in personal growth and self-development. So each of them is looking for cheese. That's the story. So Sniff, Scurry, Hem, and Haw are all looking for cheese, which in the story represents anything that you're seeking or relying on right now, like success, love, peace, security, health, status, money, whatever you please is your cheese. I wrote that and made that up. Make sense? So in the beginning of it, everything looks normal, right? All 4 characters happen upon a massive piece of cheese in the maze, and that's referred to this spot in the maze called Cheese Station C. It's almost like a scientific project or experiment going on. So they show up every day, eat their fill, and build routines around going to Cheese Station C. Some even start to take it for granted. So he starts to mention how we start to notice that people take for granted that which is always there, or who is always there in our life. But then, as fate would have it, and as change would have it, upon returning to Cheese Station C one day, the cheese has disappeared. It's been moved. It's gone. So we get to see how all 4 of those characters, which you're going to be trying to figure out which one you are at any time. And if you can phase place your character and see that your character is in an inefficient or a status of yourself, an inefficient version of yourself, then that would be you catching yourself drifting, right? And then unveil the opportunity to shift. So it's really fun to start playing around maybe with your friends and know the characters and be able to phase place and identify yourself as a character that is not going to get the job done or is wasting time. So the cheese has been moved one day, and we get to see how all 4 characters react. So Sniff, right, who senses things early, Sniff is not surprised at all. He saw this coming and understand that change is actually inevitable. And Scurry, right, the one that goes into action, who's all about taking radical responsibility and action for his life, right, doesn't spend too much time analyzing things. So Sniff and Scurry are a great team, right? Especially if they work together. They lace up their little maze running shoes and do what? Start searching for new cheese in the maze. But there's Hem and Haw, right? Hem and Haw, as soon as they notice that there's no more cheese, they freeze. A lot of rhyming going on here. I don't know if you notice. So Hem refuses to accept the loss. He digs in, he gets angry, right? He positions himself as a victim of the cheese being gone. He gets angry. He keeps going back to the same empty station day after day, hoping and praying that things will return to what he called normal. He doesn't find that this is a fair thing. You know, who did this? He wants to know whose fault it is. So that's Hem. And then on the other hand, there's Haw. Haw at first takes Hem's lead. Haw is actually affected and influenced and persuaded by Hem, right? He's bummed out. He says, yeah, me too. You know, he joins a movement with Hem. And over time, he starts to realize, he starts to get more conscious and realize that this is not working out. That's what Haw does. Staying stuck at this old spot, waiting for Godot, like the other fable, you know, this place of denial and frustration isn't getting him anywhere. So Haw actually has the ability to recognize the definition of insanity, trying to do the same thing and expect different results. Hem can't see that. Hem digs in and he plants, you know, he buys real estate below the line of responsibility. He's a victim and he's going to sit there and wait until somebody comes to save him. And all the messages that we hear in life is that nobody's coming to save us, right? So eventually Haw musters up the courage, this is us, most of us, to leave the comfort zone and head back into the unknown of the maze. Brave move for Haw. And as he goes, he begins to leave messages. This is such a sweet part about this book. And these messages are gold. So as Haw is going on an exploration into the unknown, right? You've got Scurry and Sniff who are running around saying, with all this shit, there's got to be a pony somewhere, right? But Haw took some time and he's going around, but he's also considering paying it forward to others that might be lost. Are you somebody that pays forward what it is that you learn in your insights? When my book comes out, you'll see that's what it is all about. So he starts to leave messages for others on the walls, right? And this is about wisdom being accessible to everyone that follows. You know, whenever we go through life and we learn a breakthrough, like I had some of the most life-changing breakthroughs ever. If I don't leave those messages for others, especially my children, then I won't get to keep those breakthroughs. You know, they say that, I always say this at the end, if you want to keep something, give it away. So here are some of the ideas of some of the messages that Haw leaves so courteously for us. What would you do if you weren't afraid? So these are the things that are going through his mind that are helping him go. Smell the cheese often so that you know when it's getting old. Do you know when cheese station A is getting old? Because remember, the other character, Sniff, who can see things coming before they happen, that's a talent of his. He can smell the cheese, right, before it gets too old or before it disappears. And then the other one is movement in a new direction helps you find new cheese. There's so many valuable lessons in that, right? So these are messages that he's leaving on the wall for others. Highest level of consciousness, right, is to serve mankind. You know, the greatest gift that we will ever receive, this is in my talk called Give and Receive, the greatest gift we'll ever receive in life is the gift of helping others, to be useful in helping others get what they can't get, paying it forward. So, and of course, here's the big one. The quicker you let go of old cheese, the sooner you will enjoy new cheese. So there's a time constraint. There's a time suck in being stuck in our old ways. As a matter of fact, a lot of people die with that written on their tombstone. So the moment that you're dissatisfied in life, right, and you're sick and tired of being sick and tired and things like that, right, the quicker you move on from that, take action today, the sooner you will enjoy new cheese. Now, here's the thing. This story is so simple that your brain actually might be tempted to brush it off or overcomplicate it, right? The trick to this book is to keep it super simple, but don't let simplicity fool you in this book. It's actually a mirror. It asks, which character are you at this time? So are you Sniff right now? And if you're here with me live, give it a try and tell me which character you are. I'm going to read through them right now. If you're listening to the podcast, once this is all cleaned up and done for that, write it down and send it in to me, and maybe write it out a little bit and explain to me some characteristics that you've identified about yourself. So are you Sniff, tuned into things early, fully embrace change and challenges as ingredients in the recipe for more cheese? Not surprised when confronted by change, see change as an expected guest. That's Sniff. Or are you Scurry, ready to move, no matter what? Obstacles are the way, and your antidote for change is action. That's Scurry. Or are you Haw, scared but curious, easily influenced but not insane, right? Not looking to stop and do nothing, right? Not insane. There's my brother Jamil. Hey everybody, just so you know, it's a little bit late if you didn't wish him a happy birthday. For those of you listening to the live, my brother Jamil Frazier turned, I think, 35. I think he's 35 years old. So happy birthday to Jamil. So are you Haw, scared but curious, easily influenced but not insane, not caught up in the definition of insanity, right? Sooner or later, you're gonna go. Or are you poor old Hem, holding on for dear life to what's already gone and spending eternity in that dark space? Now, what I'll tell you is no matter which one you are, the goal would be to be able to identify if you're Sniff, Scurry, Hem, or Haw. And the reason why is only then would you be able to make a conscious decision if it's serving you or not. Okay. And also, you'll also be able to see that you're a little bit of all of them, but one of them is predominant. So here's where I bring in the interface response system, and that's my 4-step system. The interface response system, as a reminder, is a 4-phase framework that I developed to help people respond to life more consciously. See, our brains run 95% of the time subconsciously, unconsciously, on autopilot. So the idea is to take that 5% conscious window and try to expand it. So very, very hard to do, right? Most of the decisions that we make in life and the perceptions we make and our responses are run by our regularly scheduled program. So the interface response system is a tool that anybody can use, and this is what we teach in our Make Sense Academy, to apply at any time when you're evaluating things. That helps you, as I said before, change the way you look at things. So it's a 4-phase framework that I developed to help people respond to life more consciously, especially when they're being emotionally or psychologically triggered by the adversities associated with change. So here's how it aligns beautifully with this amazing book. So in phase 1, in accordance with this book, and here's some of the lessons. In phase 1, we call it perceive. So this is where we become armed with awareness. Phase 1 arms you, equips you, weaponizes you with awareness. Awareness is the awareness I'm talking about is of the conditioned nature of your mind. Your mind's been conditioned. Aware that the thoughts and feelings that we see and feel and face and change, right? Or I'm sorry, aware that the thoughts and feelings that we see and feel in the face of change are not all our own. They came from somewhere else, but they're ones that we acquired as gifts and offerings from what I call our MFTPSE, which stands for our mother, father, teacher, preacher, society, and the paying forward of evolution. So this awareness validates the insertion of phase 2, which is what we call the pause. So the idea of practicing cognitive distancing and pausing right? And thinking about something first, distancing yourself from the response is a very, very hard thing to do if you don't understand and become armed with awareness of your conditioned mind, because that's what validates you saying, hey, you know, maybe I should think about things first, considering what I'm thinking about right now came from mommy and daddy, right? So phase 2 is pause. So instead of reacting to what's being lost or spiraling into fear, you pause using the make sense coaching technique that we call and that is HMMM, a sound that prompts us into this space, right? It prompts us into this space that distances us between the stimulus and our response, our programmed automatic response. It stands for the HMMM. It stands for haven't made up my mind. Why do we have to make up our mind so fast? See, that's one of the things that we want to do with our conditioned mind is not trust it right away, unless we have to jump out of it way of a speeding train or something like that, or somebody throws a rock at your head, right? You're allowed to think, because if you don't think, what you're going to do is you're going to allow your knee-jerk reaction to call the shots. That's not being the dominant force of your life, right? That's allowing that's handing over the keys of trust to a program that somebody else did. So this places you in the space between the stimulus and your response, where you may evoke phase 3, right? So in that space is where you can practice phase 3 of the interface response system, and that is called process. So now in this space, right, between the stimulus and your automatic response, we give ourselves permission. So you have to actually take the write protect switch off of your SD card, which means that you're open and curious to new information. So you have to give yourself permission to evaluate the perceived change in this case through the various lenses and perspectives outside of the one that you always use. This is why JC wears glasses with no lenses. And everybody says, oh, it's funny. It's a funny gimmick and stuff. I said, no, it's just a reminder. It's an anchor for me that I get to choose what lenses I look at. So I don't want some external lenses put in my glasses. Now, the funny thing is I've been doing this so long that I'm almost blind without them. So I put them on and I can see better. I can't explain it, but that's the way it happens. So we do this by running the perception of change through what we call a sorting filter. And we teach this in our Make Sense Academy. If anybody's interested in that, just say make sense and we'll tell you about that. So this sorting filter has built into it, and you've programmed this sorting filter to ask specific questions like, what's happening here? What's really happening here? You know, what actually changed? What assumptions am I making? Does this really affect me? Or how is this happening to me rather than for me? Or vice versa. Is this happening to me or is it happening for me? What am I actually afraid of here? What is the change revealing about me? Ooh, I love that question. And here's the last one. What might be possible now as a result of the change that wasn't possible before? So these are questions that we program into our sorting filter, and we just give ourselves permission, now that we're in this conscious space, to pass what we're perceiving through these questions. And if it makes it all the way through and check, and it's worth your time, well, then deal with it. But I don't like to just deal with things with my knee-jerk reflex that I learned from mommy and daddy and teacher and preacher and social media. And remember, whatever we consume with regularity is what we assume with regularity. I'm not letting those guys make the decision. So here is where Hall started his transformation. Remember, Hall is the one that eventually goes out on his own. So when he finally noticed that clinging to cheese station C was not working because there was no cheese there, right? In fact, I believe that Haw is actually a good representation of most people, right? Especially those that come to me that are taking interest in Make Sense Coaching and Make Sense Academy. These are people that are sick and tired of getting sick and tired, or sick and tired of being sick and tired. And when somebody comes to me and claims that they're stuck, that's a Haw move, right? I'm like, Haw, what's up, Haw? Right? That's somebody that goes, I don't want to be stuck anymore. Is that you? Is that you? Well, that's not a bad place to be. The worst place to be is him, when you're like, I'm not stuck. This is not my fault. So this sets you up after you look at things through different lenses and different perspectives, and you get to pick the one that is most in support and conducive with your goals and dreams, right? That's the process phase. Then you can move into phase 4, and that is called proceed. So now that you've paused and properly processed things, you're ready to move, right? This is when Haw goes out there and he starts exploring, right? But you're not doing this reactively, right? You processed with alignment, right? You processed things and you questioned whether they were in alignment with your intentions and whether or not they're in support of your goals and dreams and the things that matter most to you. So if you've done that, congratulations, you're ready for a healthy response. And that's the whole premise of changing the way you look at things so that the things you look at change. If you change the way you look at things, and that changes the way you're looking at them, they start to change, and you get to see if they're actually worth your time. Isn't that cool? And their value either comes out or diminishes. This is how I've gotten rid of people in my life. Can you relate? So you don't run away from change. You actually start to move with it. And this is where Sniff and Scurry live. They move with change, right? So you start to evolve from Haw into Sniff and Scurry. You start to take on their traits, right? We do so with alignment with our highest wants, needs, and desires. So this is when Haw kind of starts to re-enter the maze, unsure of what he's going to find, but knowing that he can't get stuck, right? Or knowing that he can't stay stuck. That's that moment. If you feel like you're stuck and you don't want to be stuck, you're going to throw a Haw move. You understand? That's the Martin Luther King would call it the fierce urgency of now. There's that moment where you don't care about how you're going to get somewhere. You're either attached to a goal that's super sexy and valuable for you, or you're in such a situation that you hate so much, and I've been there, that you'll do anything but it. And I always give that analogy. If I put your head underwater and you can't breathe, what do you want? You want air. You don't know how you're going to get it, but you're going to do everything but close to dying to get that air. That's the way human beings are. So I want to give some of my own thoughts on this. I call them dragon thoughts. So the most important lesson that I picked up from Who My Cheese is that change is not the enemy. Let's create a different relationship with change, right? Change is not the enemy. Our relationship with change and the way that we look at it is what actually determines whether we suffer or grow. So if you feel like you're suffering right now, I'm going to contend and challenge you to look in the mirror and say, am I actually suffering, or am I just looking at this situation as me suffering? Because all you have to do is change the way you look at things. Come learn how to do the interface response system, and you'll learn how to do that. And then you'll start to grow. And that's when somebody starts to say, maybe I'm actually growing through this instead of just going through this. So catch yourself being a hem, and then at least advance yourself to a Haw, and then maybe you get to the Sniff and Scurry. So if you're clinging to something that used to feel secure, if you've been if you've been waiting for your cheese to come back, if fear is kept from if fear has kept you from exploring what's next, then this actually might be a window, an opportunity, and your moment. A moment like this. I love that moment where I recognize that all of my uncomfortable discomforts and frustrations and sometimes anger and things like that is an opportunity and a moment. Potentially, you could look at it as something called a wink from God. And it's a wink saying, lace up your shoes, stop hemming and hawing, and step back into the maze of life and start sniffing and scurrying. Not recklessly, not seeking perfection, but more consciously and trusting in the process and embracing change as a necessary ingredient in the recipe for success. So using the interface response system to help you execute the goal of changing the way that you look at things so that the things that you look at change. That's the idea of the interface response system. And anybody can use it, even the ones that don't believe in themselves, which is not a precursor for success. Neither is timing or motivation. So this is some good shift as it places you in control of change. That's the idea, is change is not the enemy, right? unless it's running your life. But you're going to shift and become in control or claim control of change, thus equipping you to proceed phase 4 with power and confidence. So let this story be more than just a summary for you. And please go read the book. We're talking about like a book you could probably read in 3 hours. Let it be a call, a small, wise nudge from the part of you that is open, curious, and ready for more. Sick and tired of being sick and tired, but open, curious, and ready for more. And I'll leave you with this, something that Hall wrote on the wall for us all, and I didn't share it for you yet. He says this: old beliefs do not lead you to new cheese. Old beliefs do not lead us to new cheese. So what beliefs are you willing to outgrow today? So I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode of Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. If it moved you like it moved me, this book saved my life at a very, very tough time. Somebody handed this book to me. I suggest you go buy it. All of the resources will be in the notes. Go buy this book, read it, and then give it to somebody else. I don't have my book because I've given it away. I buy a lot of these books, very small, very cheap. So read that book. I encourage you to read it and share it with a friend who may be standing on the edge of change. And if you're ready to go deeper in building emotional intelligence and conscious responding in your life, I'm going to encourage you to check out the Make Sense Academy and just say Make Sense, and I'll send you information for that. It's not for everybody, but it is open and available to everybody because it's a timing thing. You got to be ready for growth and start taking the steps towards becoming the dominant force of your life. So until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and remember, you don't control the maze. You just have to learn how to move with change and move through the maze. Remember, if you learned something today, give it away. That's the only way it's going to stay. I'll see you next time. Have a great day. Little rhyme there. Bye-bye now.